SacTown Sports 1140. It's time for Kings.
This is for the men who never settle, the ones who miss the fairway all day and still pull out the big stick. The type of guy.
Welcome in, everybody, to Kings Weekly. I'm Chris Watkins. I'm your host. I'm very excited to bring you guys this show every single Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon. I cannot wait for the opportunity that I've been given right here. And it's a really, really exciting thing that we're doing here at SacTown Sports 1140. Yeah, this has been a long time coming. I've been nervous for this opportunity. I've been here for a couple years now, waiting for an opportunity like this, and I'm glad to bring you guys Kings content every Saturday from 11 to noon. And without further ado, we might as well just get into things and get things going. And first off, I want to talk about Mike Brown. You know what? Before we even talk about Mike Brown, let me set the tone. Kyle, on the other side of the glass, let me hear that Mike Brown primal scream, please.
Regardless.
Oh, that gets me
Does
ready.
that concern you?
Hit me with another one.
Ah!
Yes.
Ah!
Oh, yeah. That is the proper level of excitement that we have for this show. Now I'm ready. Okay, now I'm ready to talk about Mike Brown and why I'm completely buying into this culture change that he has brought to Sacramento. And I know culture change is kind of one of those cliches that every, whenever you hire a new coach or a new GM, culture change is the first thing you're going to hear. Obviously, if someone's coming in, the previous regime didn't work out, they're looking for a change. And it's just a cliche you're going to hear. With Dave Yeager, I think a big issue for the team was they liked Dave. They respected him as a coach. I think he clearly, his message got through to the team. They eventually got 39 wins under their belt, the best season the Kings have had in a very, very long time. But as a person, I think the relationship wasn't quite there. I think the players didn't, for whatever reason, I think it was a select few. I don't think it was the entire team, but just didn't get along with Dave. And I think from a coaching standpoint, yes, his message got through, but the organization didn't believe that was sustainable for the future. And that's where Luke Walton came in, where Luke was kind of a little bit of the opposite. Obviously, Luke comes from the Walton family, Bill Walton, the legend. We know how notoriously loose Bill is. Bill is a free spirit, very laid back kind of guy. And I'm sorry, Bill Walton is a very laid back kind of guy, and Luke showed elements of that for sure. You could definitely tell he was he was brought up by Bill. He definitely wasn't as laid back as Bill, but brought that good energy, and I think the players really were accepting of him as a person and really wanted to succeed for Luke and with Luke. But from the coaching standpoint, it just never connected. I think they tried to play good defense under him, and the question is, did they really try to play good defense? Because defense is really an effort thing. And the entire tenure of Luke Walton, that was just an incredibly big problem for them, was trying to get that defensive identity. And in comes Mike Brown, where that's his staple, is defense. And he's a defensive mind. And I can't lie to you, when they first brought in Mike Brown, I wasn't the most excited. Mike Brown was not my first choice for this team. I was looking in the initial process. They were bringing in Darvin Ham, who's now the Los Angeles Lakers coach, Charles Lee, who's still an assistant in Milwaukee with the Bucks, Will Hardy, who's the current Utah Jazz head coach. I was looking for someone like that, where it's a younger guy, someone who understands where basketball is at this point, where offense is going in the modern day. I remember saying, I wanted them to bring in the Sean McVay of basketball, like someone who's young, can develop with the team, and is forward thinking. And Mike Brown is just flat out not that. I mean, it's not. I don't mean to poo-poo on Mike Brown's offensive schemes or anything like that, or his age. I wouldn't say Mike Brown is a younger coach in the league anymore. At least when he first got his start in Cleveland, he was definitely that. But I think Mike is exactly what they need, a nice combination of what Dave Yeager brought as a coach, the level of respect, the level of the demands that Mike had for the players. I think they respect Mike and are willing to hear what he has to say and take it in stride. I remember Domantas Sabonis saying a couple days ago that they're kind of past the point where last season when they would hear criticism, they would kind of internalize it and really dwell on it, and it was kind of like they took it personally. And this year they've gotten over that hump, and it's not about taking it personally or trying to point somebody out or point the finger at somebody. It's just about getting better, and I think that's Mike Brown to a T. I mean, we've heard we got De'Aaron Fox here talking about the level of accountability that Mike demands on his players.
Mike is gonna say something about everything. If it's small, he's going to say something. If it's big, he's going to say something. And I think that's one thing that, good teams want and they need because little things start to add up. And we've talked about that for years, mixed boxed out, a slightly missed defensive assignment that can just break down an entire possession. If he sees something, he's going to say it. And that's good. But also when we're playing, he's going to say it, but not to the point where it's going to slow us down for a minute or two and guys start getting stiff. So he's going to say it, get what he has to say out, and then we keep going.
Yeah, and you saw that last night. I mean, in the Kings preseason game last night against the Los Angeles Lakers, Mike Brown called the timeout on the second possession of the game, or second defensive possession of the game. It was 2-2, and I think they allowed a backdoor cut or a 3 on the second possession. I can't remember which one it was. And Mike Brown instantly, I used to call them Mike Malone timeouts back in the day when Mike was our head coach, because Mike would call a timeout the second someone had a missed assignment, and he would just walk to the free throw line. It was almost like I will stop this play myself if the ref doesn't see my timeout, because I cannot see any more of this. And that's the kind of stuff you're seeing out of Mike. Is he's not letting these guys slide. He's letting them know every single mistake they're making, whether big or small, like De'Aaron said. Mike is putting it on them and letting them know what he expects out of them. And that's the kind of thing that's going to get the respect of the players and keep the respect. Now, saying this, we're very early in this process. We haven't even gotten to regular season game number 1. 100%, this could be reminiscent of the Dave Yeager situation, where eventually maybe his voice does get tired, or maybe there's the communication or the personal side of things. Maybe people start to take Mike Brown's criticism too personally. That's definitely in play. It can definitely happen. I just don't see Mike Brown being that kind of guy. I mean, in his introductory press conference that he had when he first got announced as head coach, he laid out his steps, what he has found to be the key to winning culture. And I mean, after hearing this, I was so ready to buy in fully to Mike Brown.
I've been with a lot of different teams in my 30 years, and I've experienced what I believe is something that can get organizations over the top, not just in 1 year, but year in and year out. And that's having a winning culture. So my job is to lead in that area. Every organization out there, in my opinion, has a soul. And the stronger that soul is, the better that organization will be. A strong soul, in my opinion, equates to a winning culture. And there's 3 areas that I'm going to really focus on to get that right. The first one, there has to be a vertical and horizontal alignment of trust within all the units of an organization. It's not just about basketball. It's business side, it's the medical side, it's the players, it's the coach and staff. There's got to be a level of trust that's unattainable in most instances. The second area is there has to be a set of values that are led and upheld by the leadership of this organization, starting with me. And then thirdly, there has to be an embracement of your role. Everybody will understand what their role is. I'm not just talking about our 15 or 17 players. Everybody in the organization, from the business side to front office, again, will know what their role is and they'll embrace it.
I mean, this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. Mike, I've been to just about every practice and heard just about everything Mike Brown has had to say to the media. And I mean, he makes you want to like run through a wall for him. Like when I hear the passion that he has for the game of basketball, it makes me like want to strap football pads on and be like, let's go. Like, where do you want me to go, coach? Like this guy, I just don't see that kind of passion and that kind of energy really dying with Mike Brown. It seems like that's just who he is. He's alive at practice. He's very lively during the games. And that is the kind of thing that really does change the culture is being on them every day, setting expectations, having them meet those expectations, and then setting new expectations. I think these guys are in a perfect structure, which is something De'Aaron Fox, I remember last year would say a lot of the time is he didn't feel like the coach that they needed to bring in was a disciplinarian. He felt like what they really needed was structure. They understood what they needed to do. They just need to understand how to do it and how to really build that foundation. And Mike Brown's been around the block. He was the Cleveland Cavaliers head coach back in the mid 2000s, obviously coaching LeBron James, leading them to an NBA Finals. He coached Kobe Bryant in those Laker teams in the mid 2010s, I believe, and that had its own set of difficult circumstances. Mike has been the assistant in Golden State for the past couple years. I think he's picked up upon what works and what doesn't from a winning organization, and I think we're just so incredibly blessed to have him here in Sacramento. Man, like I was not expecting it to be me to be the guy who fell sucker. No, I shouldn't even say sucker because it feels like it feels real. It doesn't feel like I'm being bamboozled. I'm all in on Mike Brown, and I'm really excited to see what this team looks like going into the season, because adversity also is going to be a big thing for the team. I think when they first meet adversity, how they bounce back, that's when, will Mike Brown's energy hit the same, or will it fall short? When you're winning, all things are good. The Kings are 4-0 in the preseason. Everyone's happy. They've been blowing people out. I think they have like a 30-point differential in the 4 games in the preseason. There's nothing to complain about. I mean, Sean Cunningham of Fox 40 has been asking after these blowout games, like, hey, is there anything to take from this? I mean, you're absolutely killing these teams. Like, is it tough to get anything out of these blowouts? And every single time Mike has been like, absolutely. This is like everything you can learn from. There's tiny mistakes all over the place that you can always fix and clean up. And it's definitely something different. It's tough. It's unfortunate that it's only preseason, because I kind of feel like I'm ready to get fooled all over again. But at the same time, like it feels different. I mean, I've talked with countless other media members, and everyone is very, very cautious, I think, and rightfully so. I mean, after 16 years of not making the playoffs, people are very cautious to jump in optimistically to the Kings and to just wholeheartedly believe that this thing is going to work. But it just feels different. I don't know how else to put it. The guys seem energized. The vibe was a huge word being thrown out all training camp and all throughout this preseason. The vibes are good. Everyone seems to be getting along. Honestly, I think last season was tough going into it with, I think Buddy Hield was unhappy. Obviously, Marvin Bagley came out game 1, or his agent came out game 1 and released the statement about how ridiculous it is that Marvin's not starting. So that kind of creates some tension going into the season. There was questions on whether Luke Walton was going to stay with the team or not, and whether or not he would stay with the team. I think that just all of those factors, all of those variables are not there this year. We know who the coach is. I mean, Harrison Barnes is the only one whose contract situation is kind of up in the air. But if anyone is going to be a disgruntled player or whatever, I think it's not going to be Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes is the ultimate professional. And I fully trust that that is the guy who, even though, yeah, this is his last big opportunity for a contract. He's 30 years old, heading into free agency. He has every right to want to earn every single dollar that he can try and get. But I don't think Harrison is the type of personality to let that get in the way of team success and his play. I think he's a guy who lets the game come to him, and I don't see that really changing for him. So I just think all around the vibes are immaculate, dare I say. The vibes are really, really good, and I think that's a huge credit to Mike Brown and the culture that he is trying to instill, and the culture that I think is starting to really seep in with this Kings team. And now it's just a matter of taking all of this positive energy, all of this momentum that they have from the preseason, and taking it into the regular season. And you know, they start Wednesday against Portland. I'll be excited to see how that goes. We'll talk about that a lot later in today's show. But you know, I'm excited for the season, man. Like, normally there's definitely a level of doubt and skepticism that I have, but honestly, with the depth, with Mike Brown at the helm, with Fox and Sabonis having a full offseason and training camp to work together, call me a sucker, man, but I'm ready to buy into this Kings team, and I am ready to be hurt again. Okay, I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but you know, fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 16 times, I don't know what we're doing anymore. But you know, those are my general thoughts about Mike Brown, and we're gonna get into everything here on Kings Weekly. Brendan Nunes will be joining me in studio coming up in our next segment. And I'm going to ask him how he thinks the starting lineup is going to shake out. So be sure to stick around for that. You are listening to Kings Weekly with Chris Watkins.
From the draft to free agency to the summer league to the games that matter the most.
It's good, and it's
in studio to help me breathe a little. I appreciate that, man. How are you doing on this wonderful Saturday?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be the first guest of the next big show in Sacramento, man. I'm hyped for you for sure, and
appreciate it.
Glad you're getting this opportunity, man.
Yeah, man. Well, you're definitely going to be a big part of it. I'm going to have you on countless weeks. Frankie Cardicelli, my Return of the Roar co-host and Kings insider here at SacTown Sports 1140, will also be joining me. He'll be joining me pretty frequently whenever Brenden can't make it. So I'm really excited for this guest segment and just things that we can talk about Kings basketball like we always do. Brendan's the one guy who I think actually talks more basketball outside of like work setting than me. Like pretty much every time we talk, it's just about basketball.
I don't really do much else, to be honest. I probably could entertain myself in other ways.
Yeah,
but
no,
I'm sick
it's
of
the best.
to watch Kings basketball.
Hey man, there's nothing better than torturing yourself to Kings basketball. But this year's hopefully going to be a lot more exciting, and a big part of that's Mike Brown. I talked about Mike Brown for the entirety of the first segment. What do you feel like Mike Brown brings to this team that just previous, or at least the previous few coaches haven't?
I think you did a good job of laying it out that
Thank you.
the energy is different around Mike Brown. I think that his attention to detail is something that he's talked about a lot, right? And I think that you see that, like competitive spirit is another thing he talks about. You mentioned like defense being a lot of effort. I think that's definitely the case. And also just knowing going into a game, so much of it is being prepared and knowing like we're going to defend X player in Y way and we're going to change it up halfway through, and knowing ahead of time not just why you're doing something but what you're going to do, but why you're going to do it. That way you can change it up on the fly if need be. I think that everybody believes in Mike Brown, like as cheesy as that is. And, is that something that could fade over time? Like you talked about that we kind of saw with Dave, maybe, but right now I think everybody buys in, and it helps that I think the roster's on the same page too. Everybody seems to want the same thing. You mentioned Buddy Bagley earlier. I think those were two guys that it just made for a weird energy around the team, for a lack of a better way to put it. So I think that it's a combination of different things, but when it comes to Mike Brown, I think the attention to detail and holding everybody accountable from the top down. Like if Fox or Domas, Sabonis make any mistakes, he's going to let them know about it the same way that he's going to let Jordy Fernandez, Luke Laux on his coaching staff know if they made a mistake, or Matthew Dellavedova if he made a mistake, and he's hyping up guys like that at the end of his bench. Like I think that it's really attention to detail and not taking anything but 100% effort.
You mentioned his press conference last night and Domantas Sabonis. It made me instantly think of this. I want to get your quick thoughts on this. Last night, Mike Brown did make a very, very clear point that he was not referring to Draymond Green's defense in total, but compared Domantas Sabonis's communication on defense as like the back line of defense, being the center of the team. Being able to really see what's going on the floor, really gave a lot of credit to his communication. How do you see Domantas kind of establishing his defense this season? Like he's clearly not what you would think as the prototype rim protector, but defensively, what do you see him bringing that can kind of keep him above water?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's a really smart player, that you see that in his offense, right? I think his defensive shortcomings kind of come from just physical limitations.
Right.
He moves good in a straight line, but I think when it comes to like moving his hips, I mean, he's just not the most fluid guy, which is not something to be blamed for a 6'10" person out there. Like most people aren't fluid. The guys that are the outliers, really. So, and he doesn't have phenomenal length, but he's obviously a smart player, like I said, from what you can see on the offensive end. And I think that's just starting to translate a little bit more to the defense. I think even when he came in last year, I was surprised at how solid he was defensively. He's not blocking shots, but he's just kind of in the right spots on rotations to deter shots, which I think is the next best thing and something that you can do pretty consistently. And I think we saw right away last year that he was a talker when he's out on the floor. And apparently that's something that Mike Brown is emphasizing going into this year. And it'll be interesting when we get to ask Domas about his perspective on that and how much it's been emphasized. But I think, yeah, I mean, having a back line that communicates like that on defense, how many times last year did we hear?
No
I mean,
time.
they had to come up with different excuses each time for how many times we had to ask what happened tonight on defense. But most common answer was probably communication.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a big thing for sure going into this year. I worry about the lack of rim protection still, to be honest, but it's been a good start.
Yep. Brendan Nunes of the Kings Herald, Kings Pulse podcast is joining me right now. Brenden, Mike has been very uncommittal about the who's starting at the number 4 spot. I'm sorry, at the 4 position for the Kings. Last night he said that Kevin Huerter will be his starting 2. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox starting at the point guard, Harrison Barnes at the 3, and Sabonis at the 5. How do you see the 4 position kind of playing out throughout the season? Because I don't think that we're going to necessarily see a consistent player at the 4 for a while.
Yeah, which is a little, I guess, triggering compared to last year, to be honest. Like, I get why it's a different thing, but this is exactly what was happening last year, right? If we want to talk about KZ Okpala, who I'm a really big fan of, I like his defense. Mike Brown hyped him up a lot last night, and he started 3 of these 4 preseason games. The one game Okpala didn't start was the game that they played against a Phoenix Sun team that had 10 players injured. And I question if Chris Paul or Devin Booker were in that game, would KZ Okpala have been out there to shut guys down? But KZ Okpala is pretty reminiscent of Mo Harkless.
Very much.
And Trey Lyles is a guy that was on this team towards the end of last year when there was still that rotating spot at the 4. The difference is Marvin Bagley compared to Keegan Murray now. And I think that you feel like you have the future answered, right? The long-term answer is Keegan Murray. But right now, it seems like I could see them looking in Okpala's direction. Mike Brown's really big on Okpala, it sounds like. Last night, he had really high praise. And previously, before their time together with the Nigerian national team, Mike Brown said that he thinks he has Defensive Player of the Year type potential.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, take that for what you will. Like, you see all the skill sets with KZ. He's just got to be able to hit catch and shoot shots on the offensive end. So I think there's a chance that KZ is that guy, but really it's Keegan Murray to me.
Right.
Like, I think he closes games, and I think you had a really good point where we were talking the other day of like how much of this is because once you start Keegan, you can't look back.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's been my big thing is like it's a lot easier to bring him along slowly, see how KZ does. If KZ can kind of hold down his starting spot, that's fine. There's no negative to that for the team because I think KZ does bring something defensively for sure. And if he is holding his weight offensively, able to hit open shots like we saw last night, he's going to stay in the rotation to me. And I think he can start a lot of games for the team. Whether or not, like you mentioned, whether or not he closes is probably a different conversation. But I think that people would be surprised at how long KZ Okpala might be in this starting lineup. Do you have any? How long do you think it'll take for Keegan to I mean, it's kind of an impossible thing to guess, but do you feel like this is more of a slow process where maybe 30 games in we might see it, or do you think it's kind of just once Keegan immediately shows 5 to 15 games in, Keegan could get inserted into the starting?
I'm not too sure. I could see around like the 20 game mark. I think it's going to be really telling if he's closing games, right? That's something that like Mike Brown's highlighted too. It's about who's closing that I think is like the more important thing. And I get why people like get caught up in starters. I do the exact same thing. But to me, it's going to be interesting to see is Keegan closing games. And if so, as he kind of has been, they're not the most meaningful closing of games. Like some of it is basing this off closing of halves in preseason and things like that. But I think that he could work his way into it pretty quick, but I don't know, man. I'm a big KZ Okpala fan.
Yeah.
And it sounds
I mean, you're a big
Mike
defense guy.
I'm a big defense guy, and the Kings need to be big defense guys, to be honest. They've been horrible there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously a point of emphasis with Mike Brown. I could see KZ, like, I think that there's some value in having him out there to not let the other opposing star initiator get in a rhythm and also allow De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis or Harrison Barnes to not have to exude as much energy on the defensive end. They're still going to be doing their part, but then De'Aaron doesn't have to focus about guarding Chris Paul the same time as he's trying to get into a rhythm. Instead, he can focus on getting into a solid rhythm himself offensively while the other guard is getting thrown off a bit by a 6'8", 7'2" wingspan. So I think KZ makes a lot of sense. I think that Keegan could earn that spot in kind of the time frame you mentioned, 20, 30 games.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have an issue with it if it was start night, to be honest. Where are you at with Trey Lyles, though? Because
Trey's interesting. I think that's kind of he to me at the moment, especially if KZ's going to be in the rotation, he's kind of the guy that might fall out. I think I'm going to talk about it later, but I think Terrence Davis also is kind of in that zone. Chimezie Metu as well, where it's like you kind of do the numbers. Mike said he wanted to have around 10 guys in his rotation, and if you count them out, that's De'Aaron, that's Herter, that's Barnes. We'll put Keegan, Sabonis, Mitchell, Monk. You want to put, who am I missing here? KZ is in there. And then it's kind of Rashawn Holmes, obviously. You can't forget Rashawn Holmes. That puts you at 9. And then that's Trey Lyles, that's Terrence Davis, or that's Chimezie Metu. And that's one of those guys who, you and I aren't the biggest on Chimezie Metu, but he has previous experience with Mike Brown. There's possibility that Mike is going to lean towards that. Trey Lyles, I think, brings more of like a steady presence where it's like he's not going to overexert himself at all. He's not going to try and do something he doesn't feel like he's capable of doing. He very much plays within himself, and Terrence is kind of a microwave guy who there's already Malik Monk on the roster, so it's going to be kind of tough for him to get minutes. Kind of a long-winded way of saying I'm really not sure what happens with Trey Lyles. I think he honestly might fall out of the rotation in total if KZ's playing well, especially. I think if they feel the need to play KZ and Keegan, he might be on the short stick or might get the short stick. I wanted to ask you this question because you have literally been asking this question to every single media member you can get your hands on. Who do you think at the end of this season will be the third leading scorer on the team?
Like you said, this has been my question of the week to all the media members at practice and things like this. I think the most common answer has been Keegan Murray, and Harrison Barnes has been mentioned as well. I think some of the outliers have been, someone mentioned Domantas Sabonis.
That was this guy.
That was Chris Watkins.
That was me.
Which is probably the spiciest one.
Spiciest, yeah.
Someone mentioned
it has more to do with the fact I think he's going to lead in assists, but go ahead.
Which I'm all for.
Yeah.
I'm all for. I think Malik Monk was an answer someone threw in there as well. I went with Harrison Barnes. I mean, HB has put up numbers in the years that he's been a member of the Kings. Like, I think he can just naturally do it within the flow of the offense. I don't feel the most confident, to be honest. Like, I think that Keegan's right there, and that's the other one for me. Keegan's been really solid through the 2 games that he played. He put up 16 points in the 2 of them and 70% from the field and from 3. Like, he's been ridiculously efficient, kind of as expected. We'll see how much that ends up being the case going just into the first regular season of his NBA career. But I settled on HB, but Keegan is like right there in the running for me. Are you still with your Domas take?
See, and the Domas take is almost twofold because it mainly has to do with the fact that I do think Harrison Barnes in a contract year is going to ball out. And so I think Harrison's going to fit into like that 18 to 20 point a game scorer this year. And that I think Domas is a fantastic scorer. Since he's been given like an actual role with the team playing 35 plus minutes a game, he's kind of settled into like a 20, 12 and 6 kind of guy. I think this year with the amount of talent, with the amount of shooting they have on the team, I could definitely see him kind of lowering that average to like 16 or 17, but on the back end getting, I think his career high, I checked it the other day, is like 6.7 for a season, assists per game for a season. I could see him breaking that, maybe getting in the low 7s, maybe more. Who knows? I think they're going to run a lot of action off of Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, just that 2-man game. And you mentioned it earlier. I mean, Sabonis is such a high IQ, such a smart player. He sees the floor on a different kind of level, on like that Jokic level, on that, I don't know if I want to go LeBron level, but I do think it's probably just a notch below that. But his passing ability is right up there with some of the best especially big men in the league. And I could just see him absolutely exploding this season in terms of assists. Big fantasy guy. If anyone's into fantasy basketball, I had my fantasy draft last night during the game, and
during the game,
I did.
It was not
the best idea. Funny. I missed a lot of picks. Actually working. I was working. I promise.
I did forget to mention Kevin Huerter. Herter's been a popular answer, and that just slipped my mind there too. I think Herter's been one of the more popular answers too, and I think somebody that's right there in the running. I think he's kind of plateaued at like 12 points a game these last 2-3 years he's played with Atlanta. I thought his comments after the first game were a little bit interesting. He had something that almost felt like a little bit of like a slight jab at Atlanta of, well, this is when you're on a team that moves the ball a lot instead of kind of just running through one guy, maybe this is a little different. So I think he's in there as well, but it's going to be anybody on any given night, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to get you out of here on this question. Give me your prediction. What do you think is the best case scenario for the Kings win-loss this season? You don't have to give me the exact record, but play in. Are we talking 7-8 seed? Are we talking 9-10 seed? Fighting?
Yeah. It's a tough one, right? Because it's so easy to look at the roster itself and be like, this is really solid. They have a lot going on. There's a lot of reason for optimism, I think, justified. It gets tough when you look at the rest of the Western Conference, where it's like this is a stacked conference from top to the 11th team. And the Kings have looked really good against Portland and LA, the Lakers, two teams that in my mind they're going to be competing with for that play-in spot, and they've just straight up looked like the better team. It's preseason, so take that for what you will, but it's all we have to work with right now. I thought that they've looked really good there. I think absolute best case scenario, you're talking about like what we saw with Minnesota last year, where they kind of just totally catch people off guard. Everything is clicking. Their new coach's system is in place and working well to optimize these guys. Somebody's going to have to take a big step forward. Multiple people are going to have to take a big step forward, I think, in different levels. But absolute ceiling, I still think we're talking about a 8 seed, to be honest. Like, is there a world where they sneak in this? Like, I guess you absolute best, maybe 6, but that sounds borderline impossible to me, to be honest, with the rest of the Western Conference. So I think that just starting this year with getting into the play-in and then moving your way up from there after you get a taste is kind of the way to go about it. And I feel good about that, but absolute ceiling is a hard gauge with the West.
It is. I mean, yeah, and you kind of have like a solid group of teams that are fighting for the playoff spots. I mean, you have the Warriors, the Suns, the Nuggets, the T-Wolves, Denver, or I'm sorry, I think I said Denver, Dallas. You mentioned Portland, Los Angeles, the Kings, New Orleans. That's already 9 teams right there, and they're fighting for 10 spots. It's going to be interesting. I think, yeah, to your point, the only way that the Kings, I could see them maybe making that 7 or 6 seed would be if injuries happen to other teams. If I hate to speculate, but like if Luka Doncic or something goes down, Dallas is going to be in some real trouble. Maybe that's a place where the Kings could take advantage. Portland, we're not sure how that's going to go. There's a situation where that could go sideways. That could kind of solidify the Kings, at least in the play-in, if one of them, Portland or the Lakers, end up falling out. I feel like New Orleans will probably be pretty solid in the playoff race, but it's going to be an interesting season. It's definitely going to be an exciting season. I think it's going to be a big balancing act of excitement versus actual win-loss. But right now, for now, I will take exciting. It's been very boring at a lot of stretches for the past 16, 17 years. So if we can just get an exciting team, something equivalent to that Dave Yeager scores season, I'll take that and I'll be happy and I'll have no complaints.
And it feels like we're on the way to that right now, right? Like, I think you and me being optimistic is like saying a lot. I think maybe there's probably more I don't like to say pessimistic, but realists in my mind when you've been bad for 15, 16 years. But I think the fact that like we're optimistic when usually we're pretty hesitant. I wasn't a big Mike Brown guy like you, admittedly, when they brought him on. I'm already all for it and just a huge believer.
I'm too, man. I'm excited to see how this season goes. Definitely check out Brendan's podcast. Again, that's the King's Pulse podcast. You can also, he does features every so often on King's Herald. I think he's thinking about doing post-game recaps. I'm not going to hold you to that, but we'll see how that goes. So you can check out for him on there. You can also hear him on the King's Beat podcast. Brendan Nunes, thank you so much for being our first ever Kings Weekly guest. Appreciate you, my man. You did great.
Thanks for having me on, bro.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you're getting this opportunity and going to be tuning in often. So
Right.
Appreciate you.
Great. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. We are due for a break, but coming back, I'm going to tell you why Keegan Murray coming off the bench might not be as crazy as it sounds.
The place to tell you if the 49ers are contenders or pretenders.
It's a pretty big deal. I've been a fan of the 49ers since, 84.
Your home for 49ers.
Work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you 24/7 with supplies and solutions for every industry and access to product specialists ready to help. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Want the best movie experience in town? Join SacTown Sports IMAX Pass at SacTownSports.com and sign up today. You can win tickets to see Halloween Ends, the IMAX experience at the Esquire IMAX Theater.
Kings Weekly with Chris Watkins on SacTown Sports.
Kevin Herald will start at the 2. I'm not sure who's going to start at the 4 yet.
That's right. Mike Brown has put he planted his flag. He mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but wasn't as committal as he was last night. Kevin Herter is the starting shooting guard for the Sacramento Kings team. There was some question on whether or not Malik Monk, obviously having the previous relationship with De'Aaron Fox at Kentucky, they've played together, and Malik was very big on De'Aaron being the reason why he came back with this team. I think Malik fits better coming off the bench, so it makes sense to me. Kevin is also known as Kayvon, which is one of the great nicknames that we have in this league. Obviously, Red Velvet as well. Kevin Herter, really sneaky, great nickname guy. He's definitely more of a fit for this starting lineup. He's an excellent spot-up shooter. Brenden mentioned in that previous segment that he's 12 points a game pretty much every year in Atlanta that he's gotten minutes. with the new opportunity or with expanded opportunity here in Sacramento, it wouldn't surprise me if he's touching 16 points a game. And also maybe even, I think the Kings are going to have a lot of people who are going to be in some award races at the end of the year, which is not something. Who was the last King to win an award, a postseason award? Bobby Jackson obviously notoriously won Sixth Man of the Year. Tyreek Evans won Rookie of the Year. And we've had a couple first team all rookies. Marvin Bagley was that. I believe De'Aaron was a second team all rookie. But I think Kevin Huerter's got a great shot for most improved. There's a chance Malik Monk has a great shot for Sixth Man of the Year. Maybe Keegan Murray can double up on awards if he's not going to start for a majority of the season. He can maybe get Sixth Man and that Rookie of the Year. I think that's gonna depend more on actual win-loss success for the team in terms of Keegan getting that Rookie of the Year, because I think Paolo Banchero is gonna be an absolute monster for Orlando, and he's probably going to put up 18 and 7 a game and maybe 5 assists as well. And so those numbers are going to be staggering, and it's going to take Keegan being a part of a winning team for I think him to get the nod on that Rookie of the Year ballot. But back to the starting lineup, I think Huerter's going to bring something that this team desperately needs. I mean, his length, I think, is being slept on. The fact that him and De'Aaron, people forget De'Aaron is 6'4". I think he doesn't look very physically imposing because he's got those, he's got slender arms. He's got some really skinny legs on him, but De'Aaron is 6'4". He's long, and when he's locked in, he can be a menace defensively. And I think throwing out Kevin Huerter, who's a solid 6'7", isn't by any means a turnstile defensively. And I think he also has an edge on Malik Monk in that sense. And we saw a lot of Malik getting burned in the preseason, and Mike calling those Mike Brown timeouts, as I'm going to call them now, where he's instantly like, hey man, like you got beat back door. Like we can't have that. And so I think that's what Mike sees in starting Kevin over Malik. I just think he trusts Kevin on both sides of the floor now. And also a big thing is that bench rotation. And if you have Malik Monk coming off the bench, that's the perfect role for him. He's definitely a microwave kind of player, a guy who can get hot after hitting 2 shots in a row. 2 becomes 4, becomes 6. I mean, that guy, it's really like in the blink of an eye, he gets hot. And that's a kind of player that the Kings have not had. I remember last year thinking, okay, clock's winding down, 5 seconds. Who do they pass it to? Who's the guy who they're like, we need somebody to create their own shot. It's going to be a tough shot. And we need it's a big bucket. We need it to go in. Who was the guy? I think Buddy Hield kind of strangely was that option. De'Aaron Fox, when he's got that mid-range step back shot that he's fallen in love with and is almost automatic at points. I think that was kind of the look, but I think Malik is that guy that you put in and he's instant offense. He can get the offense going. He can also kill you because he is a very streaky shooter, and he can definitely shoot himself out of a game. And as I mentioned, he's no superstar defensively. And so if he's really not hitting his shot, it's kind of like he doesn't need to be in the game. But that brings us to the 4 position, where that's still up in the air. You heard at the top, Mike Brown very uncommittal about who he's going to start at that 4 spot. KZ Okpala has gotten 3 starts at the power forward position in the preseason. Trey Lyles got 1 in Phoenix. And that's going to be that I talked about it with Brenden a little in that last segment. And I think that's going to be the story that I follow for the beginning part of this season, is just how they bring Keegan Murray along. I think it's nice. Obviously, when you pick somebody number 4, you kind of expect them to just be automatically inserted into that starting lineup. But to me, it kind of, again, when you look at the rotation and the bench rotation, if you're going to have KZ or Keegan in the starting lineup and KZ in that backup role, the backup rotation is then Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, KZ Okpala, Trey Lyles, and Rashawn Holmes. There's not a lot of offense in that lineup. I mean, obviously, not for too long are you going to have all 5 of those guys out there. You're going to stagger a lot, but Keegan coming off the bench is good for that backup rotation. I think, if you're going to ask Malik to kind of head that backup lineup, he's gonna, like I mentioned, take some shots. He's gonna feel very free to let that thing fly. And yes, it can go good, but when it's not going well, you need to have somebody else to be like, Malik, like, just to justify, like, you have to pass it to this guy because he's also a bucket. Davion, for sure, as this is his second season. We last night, I believe he hit 3 threes in the game against Los Angeles. We don't know because the NBA stats were down league wide, so we don't have any official numbers from last night. But I think Davion hit 3 threes last night, which if he can add that to his game, if he can be more of an offensive presence, I think that does wonders for this team. But again, like that's Keegan brings a scoring punch that could be desperately needed. And I think KZ also brings something to that starting lineup that is needed. Somebody who they can just put on a LeBron James. We might see KZ guarding Damian Lillard in game 1. Someone you can just throw on the other team's best offensive player and know, like, that guy's going to give him fits. Brenden mentioned in the interview that Mike Brown sees defensive player of the year potential in KZ Okpala. And even if he is a piece of that, that's something that this Kings roster could definitely use. As we've seen in the past, the roster has no interest in playing defense previously. So that's going to be big for me. And I'm just excited, man. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. I think Keegan eventually will get that starting nod. But again, like I said last segment, I just think they're going to take their time with him. I think they're going to bring him along. I think they're going to make sure he's comfortable, and just hope that nothing really rattles him. Again, if they were to just automatically insert him into that starting lineup, a lot of the offense runs through Fox and Sabonis. He's not going to be the primary focus on offense. He's more than likely just going to, I don't want to say just stand in the corner, because I do think they would definitely try and get him the ball, but he's essentially going to be getting whatever is given to him, where I think he can really, learn and expand his game more coming off the bench at first. So, yeah, I mean, I think I could see it being a 15, 20 game period, and then we finally see Keegan inserted in the starting lineup. But it's definitely something to monitor. Real quick, in our last segment, we're always going to look ahead to the week looking forward. And this week's a little easy because we only have one game in between shows, and that is Wednesday, opening night against the in Golden One Center against the Portland Trail Blazers, who we saw in the preseason. We got a couple things to preview, starting with the matchup of the week, I guess.
Here's Kings Weekly's Game of the Week.
Yes, obviously the game of the week is Kings against the Blazers. It is the only game in between now and our next recording. I believe they play the Los Angeles Clippers next Saturday. So I'll definitely have a lot of new, fresh thoughts next week. So definitely be sure to tune in. But yeah, Portland Trail Blazers coming on Wednesday. We obviously saw them play the preseason game where the Kings absolutely blew them out by 32 points, I believe it was. And I kind of, I could see that being the case again this upcoming time. The Kings have been a great preseason team, and Damian Lillard was really not able to get anything going in that preseason game. I believe he was 2 of 9, guarded by KZ Okpala for a lot of that. Davion Mitchell as well. I'm incredibly excited for opening night. Opening night is always super fun, great energy out there. And it's the official start of Kings basketball. This is going to be a very, very interesting season, obviously, for what the future holds. I think this season is going to is kind of it's weird to say it's a make or break, but obviously with Monty McNair's contract situation up in the air, Harrison Barnes contract situation up in the air, there's a lot of room for pivoting. And, the success of the team is going to be big into how they build this team out in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Kings Weekly, again, every Saturday, 11 to noon. Appreciate it. Kyle, thank you so much. Brendan, thank you so much. We are out.
Check out the Golf to Go Hour with Frank LaRosa every week on SacTown Sports 1140. Get the latest on equipment,